Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, August the 22nd, 2023. So, a couple of commenters have mentioned Lucy Letby, who has just been convicted of murder in the UK. She killed 7 babies through a number of means: air, insulin, overfeeding them, assault. And she was a nurse, I believe, in a neonatal unit. And so she has just been convicted of murder and she's been sent to prison for life. This is not by any means a one-off event. It does happen every now and then. There is a news story about a nurse who kills the patients in her charge, children, babies. It does happen, not just in the UK. It certainly happens in America. So it's a phenomenon that I wanted to look at through a number of horoscopes. Now, in the case of Lucy Letby, I only have her date of birth. I don't have her time of birth. So that makes it a bit difficult, and I'll tell you why it makes it difficult. It's because I think that if you're talking about a nurse who kills children, I would really want to look at the moon. And the moon, does move quite a lot. In a day, the moon moves, can move 13, 14 degrees. That's almost getting on for half a sign. And so if we don't have a time of birth, we can't really look with confidence at lunar aspects. And so, that is a problem. So I'm looking at, I'm actually going to look at 4 or 5 charts today. I'm going to look not just at Lucy Letby. I'm going to look at the chart of another British nurse who killed children that she was supposed to be looking after, and that was Beverly Allitt. She did her killings at the beginning of 1991. I also want to look at the chart of an American nurse, Genene Jones. She, I believe, we don't know quite how many children she killed. She might have killed actually quite a huge number, but I think she did that in Texas. I'm kind of surprised she managed to get away with that without getting executed. Obviously, she's in prison, but you thought in Texas, people who get that kind of murder in Texas, you'd get executed, wouldn't you? I don't know. Not that I'm saying I agree with the death penalty. Just an observation. Why is he? How does someone able to? How would she survive? I didn't survive that anyway. It's kind of beside the point, isn't it? But the first chart I'm going to want to look at is actually none of these 3 nurses. I actually want to start off by looking at the horoscope of Myra Hindley. She was not a nurse, but she, if you're not British, maybe you haven't heard of her, but she was a notorious child killer. She and her boyfriend Ian Brady, in the early to mid 60s, they killed a number of children. They sort of kidnapped them, tortured them, killed them. And with Myra Hindley, we do have her time of birth. So because we've got her time of birth, we know where her moon is. So let's just look at Myra Hindley's chart. So she's got the moon in Scorpio. She was born July 23rd, 1942, 2:45 a.m. in Manchester, England, and so her moon in Scorpio was exactly square Mars. Now, she wasn't killing children out of in a sort of secret, private kind of way. She did it, with her boyfriend Ian Brady. Ian Brady was, she was, I think, at the time fixated on Ian Brady, and yeah, so you could say that maybe, or probably, if she'd never met Ian Brady, she never would have got involved in these killings. Um, but her chart, as I said, her chart illustrates the importance of the moon. Moon in Scorpio, square Mars. That's quite an angry, potentially vicious combination. Um, she also has Mercury. There's Mercury in Cancer on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now I was thinking about what would that mean. Myra Hindley had Mercury on a Mars-Saturn midpoint. Now this is someone who perhaps thinks a lot about death, who might have fantasies about killing people, who be might be quite violent. I think actually she was quite violent as a child. But the killing may have been, Mercury on a Mars Saturn may have been about just thinking about killing and whatever, but it wasn't maybe ever going to happen. But then she met Ian Brady, so it actually did happen. I think a story with her Moon Mars square was that I think she was being bullied at school, and her father told her that not to be so be so pathetic, to go and attack the bully, and that's what she did, or something like that. And she sort of really laid into it. I think it might have been a him, might have been a boy. So that's the Moon square Mars, and so yeah, we need to know where the Moon is if possible. So by the way, while we're on the subject of Myra Hindley, she was a Cancerian. This is the sort of flip side of Cancer. You think of the warm, nurturing side of Cancer. This is the vicious side of Cancer. And her boyfriend, Ian Brady, was a Capricorn, born on January the 2nd, 1938. And he had his Pluto at 2923 Cancer. So Ian Brady had his Pluto exactly conjunct Myra Hindley's sun. I'm just pointing out. Also, Ian Brady is born on January the 2nd. Probably coincidence, but Lucy Letby was born on January the 4th. Obviously different years, decades out, but both Lucy Letby and Ian Brady were Capricorns. So let's now talk about the first nurse I want to talk about is Genene Jones, and she was born in 1950, and she killed the children, infants and children. I don't think it wasn't just babies. So what is it about that chart that might make her dangerous? I don't have her time of birth. So what's going on there? Well, the first thing that hits me is the fact that she's got a Mars-Neptune conjunction. Mars and Neptune Mars-Neptune conjunctions can work in so many different ways. There can be the positive aspect to Mars, a Mars conjunct Neptune. Mars is, putting your energy perhaps into some sort of higher purpose. It could be something spiritual. It could be like giving money to charity, getting involved with charitable activities, giving your life to charity. So there's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. Mars Neptune, on the other hand, can be to do with drug abuse. It can be prostitution, criminality, and I suppose now we know that Genene Jones killed children, then we have to ask, that is where she's putting her energy into. Mars is her energy, and she's putting into Neptune. Neptune would be potentially the drugs she might be using to kill children. So that's the Mars conjunct Neptune. But we must remember we do not have a time of birth. So it's kind of quite difficult to know quite how this is working out. We don't know where her moon is. Her moon actually might be in Gemini. But as it stands, if we take the noon time, she seems to probably have a Moon-Uranus conjunction. So moon, if she's got moon in Cancer, that's the nurse, the nurturing nurse. But then it's conjunct Uranus. It erupts. Something shakes. Something happened. A nurse who behaves unpredictably, and then I suppose in this case, a nurse who kills. I'm not saying by any means that this chart has got killer written on it. I don't think it has. You could say that moon in Cancer is making a trine to Jupiter in Pisces. That would seem to be a sort of kindness. It's a nice aspect, isn't it? Moon in Cancer trine Jupiter in Pisces. But Jupiter is not always as benefic as we think. And we don't know what kind of stories she was telling herself about why she was killing. We just don't know. And as I said, we don't have a time of birth for her. One interesting thing, and I'm just going to mention it, is that she has the Aries point. Here is the Aries point, 0 degrees Aries, and it is aspecting the Mars, the Mars Saturn, the Mars Saturn midpoint. You can see that makes sense, doesn't it? You see there's Saturn in middle of Virgo, Mars middle of Libra, halfway between the two. In fact, you've got the node on the Aries point, and so she's got the Aries point on the Mars Saturn midpoint. So Aries is the world at large. Mars Saturn in her case is certainly about death. So I'm assuming that when she was convicted, she must have got a load of publicity. The whole world, maybe not the whole world, but certainly America and Texas would have seen this nurse who could have killed a lot of children. We don't know. I think she was convicted of killing 2, but I think Wikipedia said she might have killed as many as 60, I think over a 12-year period. So she would have got in the news, Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Of course, now probably a lot of people have maybe forgotten about her, but probably if you're American, I've never heard of her before, but you probably have if you're from America and you're into this kind of thing, if you're into whatever, crime and criminals and so forth, or you just read the news. So yes, she does have Aries on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Just confirm that. Midpoints. There you go. You can see that's the Aries midpoint tree, and Aries is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So just to confirm that. So let's move to the second nurse. This is Beverly Allitt. She was sometimes known apparently as the Angel of Death. And Beverly Allitt was born in Grantham in England. I think Margaret Thatcher was born in Grantham too, in Lincolnshire. So her killings happened from February through to April 1991, and I think that 13 children or babies, I don't quite know the details, were sort of injured, and I think 4 died. So, when we look at this chart, we really are doing it with 2020 hindsight. We already know that something has happened. If we were looking at this chart without hindsight, we probably wouldn't have come to the thought. We wouldn't have thought that she was necessarily a child killer. Most people aren't. But given what we know, what stands out? I'm interested in the fact that she's got Uranus on the Aries point. Uranus at 021 Libra. So I don't know. That just hits me, the fact that she's got that Uranus there. If you've got Uranus on the Aries point, then it might mean that you kind of manifest Uranus. There's the disruption of Uranus. That might be part of who she was. She is a Libra, but she's got planets in Scorpio. By the way, we do actually have a birth time for her. I didn't think we did, but actually we do. Apparently she was born around 9:15 a.m. Certainly no later for 9:30 a.m. So we do have a birth time. She's got Moon in Pisces. This Mercury in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio. When you've got planets in Scorpio, it's quite a secretive place for planets to be. Doing something secretive, like killing children and not and perhaps trying to get away with it, doing it in a surreptitious way. Now with the moon, I said, with the thing with Myra Hindley's chart, we did know where her moon was. With Beverly Allitt, 9:15. Yeah, we also know where her moon is. We can see that her moon is at 15 Pisces. So the moon is separating from an opposition of Mars, and it's moving towards an opposition of Jupiter. So she's got the moon on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. Moon opposition Mars, moon opposition Jupiter. Does this mean we have to rethink what Jupiter is all about? If you've got moon on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint, in most cases, this is quite a happy combination. Enthusiastic, optimistic. But in her case, it may have been very different. Moon on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint is perhaps a woman who goes over the top, and perhaps something triggered it. And the trigger, could have been a transit. And to get an idea of a trigger, I set up her solar return. So I'd looked at her solar return for 1990. So 1990 she would have been 1990 she would have been 22. Looking at her 22nd birthday. So here's her solar return for her 22nd birthday. This is the time when it went wrong, perhaps, because her killing happened within, February 1991. Apparently, she started killing children. So what was going on beforehand? So in her solar return, we can see that she had the sun her sun, obviously, sun where her natal sun is, but her sun is square Neptune. So that might give a hint. What actually happened. Sun square Neptune. Okay, we saw with Genene Jones, so she had a Mars conjunct Neptune in her horoscope. With Beverly Allitt, she had Sun square Neptune in her horoscope. In fact, the Sun has sort of separating from a square to Uranus and moving to a conjunction of Neptune. Now, this Uranus-Neptune conjunction dominated the sort of very early 1990s. It was a conjunction that was this big conjunction. In fact, it's Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. This big conjunction. A lot of people associate it with the fall of the Soviet Union, which was happening while all this was while she was being born. Sorry, not born. During her solar return, she was born in 1968. The Soviet Union was collapsing, but her sun was separating from a square of Uranus in her solar return, and in her solar return it was exactly square Neptune. And as we have a fairly accurate time of birth, we also see that Mars is conjunct her IC, and her solar return coincided with a full moon. So you've got a full moon, got Mars conjunct the IC, you've got Sun square Uranus. So I think that solar return suggests that something happened. Some kind of psychological shock is shown by that chart. I'm guessing that before that, we didn't really get any inklings. It may have just suddenly happened that she realized that this is, for some reason, she moved into a psychological place where she was had the state of mind where she would kill children. From a psychological point of view, we often we look at the horoscope and we just kind of take the view we've got a person who is just a consistent person over a lifetime, but maybe that is not necessarily the case. Maybe there is you can be one person and then something happens and you become another person. And notice that this solar return, she was being born in October 1968. She's 22. 22 is actually quite a vulnerable time for many of us. 22, it's a sort of if you look at her chart, she's got her Saturn. Where's her Saturn? You see, her Saturn is at 2257 Aries, and just remember that Saturn 2257 Aries. And so Saturn here is 18 Capricorn. So it's her Saturn square. So Saturn has, since her birth, has gone around 3/4 of the cycle. So you've got Saturn square Saturn. And for many people, 22 around 21, 22 is often a time when there are mental breakdowns. So that's, I think, how I would see this in this solar return. Also, good idea to look at Beverly Allitt's solar arc directions. So here are her solar arc directions for February the 1st, 1991. So if her killing spree started in February and went February, March, April 1991, then I would take what was going on February the 1st. So let's just do a by wheel. We'll put Beverly Allitt in the middle and her progress chart. So remember I said that Beverly Allitt had Uranus at 0 degrees Libra. Her solar arc directed Mars, February the 1st, 1991, was at 0 degrees 1 minute Libra. So in other words, Mars had just gone into directed. Mars was exactly on the Aries point, and was hitting her Uranus. So, that's when it happened. And further, if you look at her Uranus, solar arc directed Uranus was at 2230 Libra, which was pretty much exactly opposition, or fairly close to the opposition of her Saturn. So she had directed Uranus opposition her Saturn, directed Mars opposition her Uranus. So directed Uranus, that Saturn in Aries that she has, it's not a great place for Aries. Saturn's in the 6th house. Maybe that said something about the 6th house is to do with health, her work, working as a nurse, and then Uranus comes along and it totally challenges and breaks up whatever Saturn means, and things, obviously things must have gone very wrong. And I think the directed Mars on her Uranus and the Uranus opposition her Saturn, I think that is suggestive of some kind of breakdown. That's Beverly Allitt's chart. Because it's timed, we've got more details to think about. So my view on this is, you would look at something like a solar return or solar arc directions to get some idea of when things might have gone wrong. Now, one thing about Beverly Allitt before I move to Lucy Letby is her Mars-Saturn midpoint. So there's her. We should always look at midpoints. Well, what is her Mars-Saturn? Let's just go back to Lucy Letby's chart. Beverly Allitt's horoscope. So there is, Beverly Allitt's horoscope. So let's just have a quick look at her midpoints. Just check to see what the Mars-Saturn midpoint is doing. And there we see it. She has the Aries point square the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So remember that Genene Jones, the American nurse, she also had Aries. Well, she had Aries point opposition her Mars-Saturn midpoint. So both Genene Jones and Beverly Allitt had the Aries point making a hard aspect to their Mars-Saturn midpoint. And I suppose both became notorious. Beverly Allitt was the angel of death. And, at the time, I remember the name. I can't really remember the details, but it was a major story, certainly around the UK. And so Aries point, the world at large, on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, that kind of fits. So let's now move to Lucy Letby, who has just been convicted of murdering 7 babies. 13 were injured, 7 were murdered. She's now a convicted serial killer. This is her horoscope. I do not have her time of birth, but she was born on January the 4th, 1990, a Capricorn. Interestingly, or just coincidentally, again, if you're British, you probably heard of someone called Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was a doctor who killed his patients, but he was the opposite. He was killing his elderly patients. And Harold Shipman was a Capricorn. So you know, Capricorns can do bad things. And of course, Ian Brady was a Capricorn. So yeah, so here's Lucy Letby's chart. We don't have a time of birth. Now, she has Sun in Capricorn. That Sun in Capricorn is under a certain amount of pressure. She was. It's weird, isn't it? I mean, Beverly Allitt was committing her crimes in April 1991, and Lucy Letby was kind of born a year before. You know, she was born just as Beverly Allitt was about to commit her crimes. So we see this Saturn, you know, the Uranus, Neptune, Saturn in Lucy Letby's chart. That same Uranus, Neptune, Saturn that signified the fall of the Soviet Union, the collapse of communism. Not that that's got anything to do with this, but I just had to throw that in. And so yeah, the Sun is under a lot of pressure. It's conjunct Neptune. It's conjunct Saturn. It's besieged by Saturn and Neptune. So, you know, Saturn and Neptune are about sort of fears, insecurities, paranoias. That might be what it's about. And she's got the moon in Aries. You know, it would be so nice if we had her time of birth and we knew exactly where her moon was. But her noon position for Hereford, England, is where I think she was born in Hereford. So the moon is at noon was at 14 degrees 36 Aries. At noon, she would have had moon square the Sun, and she would have had moon square Neptune, and she would have had moon square Saturn. And further, she has Kemadruma Yoga. In other words, the moon that's something from Vedic astrology, where the moon is alone, where it's got nothing in its own sign, nothing in the planet in the sign next to it, nothing in the sign following. So that suggests, you know, quite an isolated person. And, you know, most people the vast majority of people who have Kemadruma Yoga are quite normal, relatively happy individuals. And so, of course, with Lucy Letby, we're looking at her chart with the benefit of 20/20 hindsight. So given what we know, then we can attach some kind of significance to her having Kemadruma Yoga. Yeah, Prince Harry, he's got Kemadruma Yoga. So, you know, Harry has his faults, but not like Lucy Letby. Lucy Letby doing things alone, killing alone, and that solitude, that I think lack of connection with other people must have had something to do with it. You know, one wonders what was going on in her head. So I would really be looking. That moon potentially square Saturn, Sun, Neptune must have had something to do with it, and it's moon in Aries. You know, in a female chart, you know, as in my experience, I think, you know, with the Sun and the Moon, they work in different ways. In female charts, as a woman grows older, certainly past about 22, she starts to grow into her moon. As a child, she will kind of more likely to demonstrate show the sun sign, but then she'll start to show the moon sign. In males, it's the opposite, starting off with the moon sign, then moving into the sun sign. So moon in Aries is wants to take the initiative, wants to take action. The moon cannot deal with, you know, doesn't want to stay in this situation. The moon wants to do something to move things on. And, you know, it's difficult for her because the moon is potentially square Sun and Saturn. and Neptune. And so maybe she feels that she wants to move things on in her life, to create a situation which allows her to move on, to break into the wherever she wants to be, by being in a situation where a child dies. I mean, some people have suggested that she might have Munchausen by proxy. I believe Munchausen by proxy. Sometimes mothers will poison their children to get attention, to create a situation, cry for help, whatever. And so that may be how this moon in Aries is actually working. And in her case, it started in 2015, 2016. So what I did was I set up a solar return for her birthday in 2015. So if we look at her Lucy Letby's solar return for the beginning of 2015, here it is. Again, remember, I don't have a timed chart, so these house cusps are meaningless. But we can see that she has Sun square Uranus in the solar return, that presage this. Just a reminder of the solar return of Beverly Allitt. She had Sun widely square Uranus, but it was Sun square Neptune. So in Beverly Allitt's case, you had the Sun square. The Sun was squaring an outer planet. In Lucy Letby's case, the square is quite intense. You can see that the Sun in Capricorn is square Uranus, and it's square the nodes. And so this square was, I would guess, was a major contributing factor. And I shouldn't forget that she had, of course, Sun was exactly conjunct Pluto during her solar return. In other words, she started her killing spree as Pluto was conjunct her Sun. That was the impact of Pluto. Now, I don't know whether it's connected or whether there's any whether it's worth pointing this out, but Ian Brady's Pluto was exactly conjunct Myra Hindley's Sun. So in that case, in Myra Hindley's case, it wasn't like a transit. She just got involved in a relationship with a man whose Pluto was on her Sun, and that had a big impact in turning her into a notorious murderer. So the Pluto must have had a big impact. Uranus is linked. So her Sun got really, really smashed up by Uranus and Pluto and the nodes, and this may have been what flipped her. Again, it's as with Beverly Allitt. She may have been fine, and then suddenly something happened. I don't know, but the killings just started. She was older though. 2015 she was born, so she would have been 25, 26. So she was sort of beyond that 21, 22 crisis. So the age she was slightly older. Now, as far as solar arc directions are concerned, here are her solar arc directions for January the 1st, 2015. Let's just look at the bi-wheel, see if there's anything interesting going on there. I mean, the only thing I sort of noticed straight away was that solar arc directed Pluto was on her Mars. So we've got a second Pluto theme. So before I go, I just wanted to check Lucy Letby's Mars Saturn midpoint. She got anything? What's Mars Saturn midpoint doing? There's her midpoints. Lucy Letby. Where's her Mars Saturn midpoint? Her Mars Saturn midpoint not as close to the Aries point as Beverly Allitt or Genene Jones, but she did have she had her Mars Saturn midpoint within less than a degree of the Aries point. Yeah, so all three of these nurses, Genene Jones, Beverly Allitt, and Lucy Letby, had Aries aspect, the Aries point making a hard aspect to the Mars Saturn midpoint. I don't know how you want to interpret that. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say on the subject of Lucy Letby. Of course, we're all sorry it ever happened, and it's a shame that she didn't get help. When I think there must have been some kind of breakdown, beginning of 2015. I don't know what happened. Maybe no one will ever know what happened. But it's a shame that someone wasn't able to stop her before it even started. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today, and I will talk to you again very soon.